let's just review a little bit to get our mind back where we were, and then we'll continue on with this establishing the general government. All right, the basic thought of this whole section was we had to take the Constitution, a piece of paper, and somehow get out of it a real existing operational government. All right, it'd be kind of like me handing you the the plans for a 1964 Mustang, and saying, all right, go ahead, make a Mustang. You'd have to go from the piece of paper that drew the sizes and told you what everything's made of to actually putting the thing together. All right, there's a lot involved in that, and that's the point of this section, establishing this government, putting this thing together. So the first thing we looked at was Congress passing some laws, setting up the executive departments, and then setting up the judicial branch. We looked at those two things. Then we looked at Hamilton's financial plan. How did he try to raise, or what was the revenue enhancement measures under Hamilton? What taxes did he implement?
Import tax and excise.
Okay, import and excise. What part of his plan generated a lot of arguments and fighting and debating about strict and loose construction?
Didn't he want to reestablish marine tourism?
He did want to do that, but that was rejected. It really didn't generate the argument too much.
The National Bank.
The National Bank, we'll see that, well, we might not see it as much as other years because we'll be skipping across the surface, but over the next 40 or 50 years, this thing comes and goes, and it's an ongoing fight here. But he pushes for it. We have one initially here at this point. Do not think at all of something like our Federal Reserve System of today. I mean, that's we have a government-controlled thing. That is, this National Bank was nothing like that at all. So, all right. So that was the economically getting this nation on some sort of footing to where we could begin to pay our bills, catch up on money we owed soldiers, and all of that kind of thing. All right, then we started talking about foreign affairs prior to the test. We talked about a treaty with Spain. What had to be settled with Spain? What was the issue?
Guaranteed the right of deposit.
Okay, if I guarantee the right of deposit in New Orleans, that's true. There's another thing. Yeah. Yeah, the southern border. In the war, Florida was given to Spain, but there was no real clear boundary. This was us and Spain getting together to establish that boundary, and that right of deposit in New Orleans was part of that treaty. Then we saw the Barbary Pirates, the first time we went to war with radical Muslims along the north coast of Africa. Then we talked about England, and the first one was Mad Anthony Wayne defeating the Indians out in the west, this part of the world. The English had been stirring them up to attack us. Then we talked about the Jay Treaty, which he has made fun of and burned in effigy and all kinds of fun things because people said it didn't address the problem. Really, it was better than war at that point. All right, so it was really not as bad as it's made out to be. And I think that's where we left off. Okay, so that was a relatively convenient breaking off point. We're still in the middle of trying to put this thing together and us establishing things. The next, all the rest of this kind of runs together. Those 5 pages all run together, and it's either the first thing we'll start with today is France, us dealing with France and some things with France, and then we'll talk about England and France, what happens as they go to war, and then we'll talk about the War of 1812. So all of these things kind of swirled together. So it was convenient to break there for the test at least. So, all right, so still looking at foreign affairs in this time frame where we're trying to establish the government. Now we're at France. Talked about Spain, talked about the Barbary Pirates, talked about England, and now France. All right, to give us some background about what's going on in France, let's think about what's going on there because it does contribute to these things that take place here. Someone other than Stephanie, what's going on in France? I haven't looked this up, so I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I heard someone on the radio last night comment that Obama, who is in France for the global climate change summit, that same guy caught at the Global Drug Science Summit or something like that. So climate change, it's just fraud. It is not science, it's fraud. But anyway, Obama made the statement that nowhere in the world are there mass shootings like there are in America. And he's in Paris. Anyway, so it's one of those where I think not even Obama would do that. So I haven't looked it up to actually see if he made that statement. But so was that what's going on in France? Obama was there still at this point in the late 1700s, terrorizing them. That would be especially juicy if he did. I'm having a current event on Friday with the high school kids. So if he did make that statement, they're going to see the clip Friday. So, all right, what's happening in France at this point? Obama isn't there. It would be better off. Wow, that's a tough choice. French Revolution, all right? That thing starts in 1789. So the same year we begin to function under the Constitution. They begin to function, or they begin to go through this French Revolution. Their slogan through this, that Obama, he quoted this. He talked about liberty, equality, and fraternity. That was their phrase. Here's the end of the French Revolution. This French Revolution was an ungodly mess. All right, the American Revolution wasn't perfect, but there was we had people defending freedom and liberty and rights given from God in the Constitution. You know, we see that in the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. We see those things listed out there. This is a complete ungodly mess, a complete rejection of God. In fact, they banned religion and started a religion of reason. You know, just complete rejection. This is an ungodly mess. It starts in 1789. The culmination of it, I guess you could say, is in 1793 with the Reign of Terror. That's where they begin executing all kinds of people, the king, with the guillotine. Very, very easy way to kill people, the guillotine. So we have that going on. And then also in 1793, we have France and England going to war. All right, so we have a lot of events taking place there. Anybody read A Tale of Two Cities? If you haven't, you should. All right, that was set in the French Revolution. The Scarlet Pimpernel. All right, he's saving the people that were going to be executed in the French Revolution. So anyway, it was a very, very bloody, ugly time in France. A whole lot of ungodly philosophy and revolutionary ideas, very dangerous ideas, are beginning to spread from France to other countries. And that's part of the reason why England gets involved here, wanting to just at least contain the mess. You guys can have the cancer all by yourself. Don't share it with us. You know. So anyway, the war breaks out there, and some of those crazy ideas start to bleed over to America. So, but anyway, enough said. French Revolution, that's going on in France. That's a very important piece of the backdrop as we look at a couple of events here that happen involving us in France. Okay, the first one takes place in 1793 under Washington, and it involves a man called Citizen Genet. Please don't tell me if I'm saying that wrong. Genet. Okay, he'll give it to me. 1793, this guy comes over to America. They referred to each other as citizens, you know, as equality. Everybody's the same. We can't say someone's the president. He was just the first citizen. You know, we're all citizen so-and-so, citizen so-and-so. That's very different. That's a very interesting movie, but very different, very completely different idea. But anyway, so this guy's called Citizen Genet, is that French thing. Okay, he came over to America, and this is the same year that war's breaking out with England, and all of that's taking place. He came over to America, trying to get American aid for France. Okay. I didn't mention it before, probably I should have. Washington declares neutrality. These two countries go to war, and we say, have fun. We're going to stay on our side of the ocean. Declares neutrality. So Citizen Genet comes over here trying to get Americans to go over and fight, trying to get private citizens to go over, trying to get merchantmen to become privateers and fight for France. starts stirring up that kind of thing. So Washington initially meets with the guy and says, "No, we're neutral. We're not helping." So then he starts going to the American populace, the citizens of America, going around Washington's back, trying to get America involved. Washington finds out about it, and he demands that Genet leave the country. And in the middle of all of that taking place, there's another change of power in France, which happens multiple times in this era. And Genet would have been killed if he went back. That typically, just to make sure that the last group of rulers didn't cause you problems, you just killed them all. So he'd have been killed. So when that takes place in France, Washington actually allows him to stay, and he settles down, lives in New York, becomes a farmer, gives up all those ideas. But it was coming to a head here with him, and it kind of takes care of itself. So Citizen Genet, that was 1793 with Washington as the president. The next event is in 1797. It's the XYZ affair. Okay, England and France are still at war. We had signed a treaty with England prior to this that we saw, the Jay Treaty in 1795. We see Citizens Genet in 93, the Jay Treaty in 95. France didn't like this, so they began to refuse to acknowledge our diplomats, refuse to talk to us, and things like that. So Adams sends some diplomats over to try to talk to France and negotiate, try to somehow settle this issue without war or other things. And so the current government of France sends 3 men to meet with these representatives. These were not officially, they were unofficially official. They weren't just kind of this side meeting with these 3 men sent from the government. And these 3 men, who are just referred to as X, Y, and Z, that's where the term the XYZ affair, just these 3 agents from the French government unofficially coming to these diplomats. They come to them and demand money. You want to talk to the French government? Cough up some money, and then you can talk to the French government. Okay? Anybody have a guess at how that settled with these people? It didn't settle very well. They refused. America is outraged at this. It was really just a bribe. They're saying, you give us some money, pay a bribe to us, and then we'll sit and talk to you. But unless you're willing to pay, forget it. So anyway, outrages people in America, outrages those diplomats that were there. They refuse to do it. They come back home, and we fight an undeclared war. It wasn't an official war, but we fight this confrontation with France. It goes from 1798 to 1800. That time frame, we're in conflict with them. Did relatively well. If you think of us being a new country, just establishing things, the Department of the Navy was created in 1798, so it's did relatively well. Okay. Towards the end of that time frame, France signals that they're ready to talk without the bribe. So in 1800, we settle this. It's called the Convention of 1800, an agreement between the 2 countries. So by that point, we have Napoleon in power. The government that tried to bribe us in 1799 or 1797 was no longer there. Napoleon is in power, and he wants to settle this little side squabble with America because he had a bigger fish to reel in. Okay, so the XYZ affair, a bribery attempt basically by the French government. If you're a big student of the French Revolution, the particular government that tried to bribe us was called the Directory. Right? They come along after the Reign of Terror. Anyway, that was the government. All right, so the XYZ affair. The third point there with France. First was the background, then the Citizens Genet, and now the XYZ affair. The next thing, the last thing, is the Louisiana Purchase. This comes along under Jefferson. This purchase is finalized in 1803. To give you, we'll see that in a minute, but 1803. Okay, with Napoleon coming to power, lots of things changed. One of the things that changed is that France gains control of the Louisiana Territory. I should show you a picture of it. Is that too low? Can you see it? Louisiana Territory. All this land had been Spanish territory. We talked about this already being Spanish from the War for Independence. All that territory France acquires it under Napoleon. And the thing that makes it an issue for us is that they also got control of New Orleans. What's the issue with New Orleans? He said, it's a port. And what had the treaty that we signed with Spain guaranteed? You said it.
The right of deposit.
Okay, the right of deposit in New Orleans. All right, so France takes over with Napoleon and then stops allowing that, doesn't allow our ships to use the harbor and the warehouses, significant blow to trade. So Jefferson sends some diplomats over to talk to Napoleon. The offer was going to be to buy New Orleans, just buy this hunk of territory, buy the city, make it U.S. territory. The guy that goes over, if you want his name, was Livingston, who's actually the existing ambassador of France. Livingston was the guy. Jefferson authorizes him to spend $2 million to buy New Orleans. And we should pause for a moment to decide if it's worth it. Gregory's saying no. Think about the debauchery. Think about the houses built below sea level. And then the people complaining when it floods. All right, anyway, that was the offer. Buy New Orleans. It had nothing to do with Mardi Gras and all that kind of stuff. It was the trade. That was the issue. All right, Livingston, our ambassador, goes to talk to Napoleon. Napoleon offers the entire territory. Okay. Think about being that guy. You go to the used car lot, trying to buy the junker in the corner, and the guy says, "Hey, for another couple $1 million, I'll give it a whole lot, everything, buildings, cash reserves, give it the whole thing." Maybe I can come up with some money. It put Livingston in. Obviously, this is an amazing opportunity to purchase all this territory. Livingston did go on a little bit of a limb. He didn't have the authority to do this. He says, "Oh yeah, we'll buy it. $15 million." Was the selling price for this entire thing. All right, very good deal. I would take it for that today. And they can keep New Orleans.
Compared to a trillion is nothing.
What's that?
Compared to a trillion is nothing.
Yeah. Oh, this is, yeah. So, all right, he negotiates $15 million for the thing, sends news back to America what had actually transpired. He didn't have a cell phone. He couldn't email. He couldn't text. He couldn't instant message. He couldn't FaceTime. I'm sure I'm forgetting some method of communication. Couldn't send airmail. What's that? Smoke signals. He could have done that, but it would have been tough to see. So obviously, the communication was the difficulty. So he negotiates this on his own, kind of in faith that Jefferson and everyone else go along with it. Sends it back to America, and obviously it's approved. The sale goes through in 1803. The entire olive, whatever, one of you girls can tell us a particular shade of green distinguished from this and that. Come on, girls, who wants to tell us? I don't know. I don't want to know a guy that knows the difference. That's scary. So, anyway, that entire area was purchased. I mentioned before a little bit of irony at this point, I believe, when we talked about the National Bank and the argument over loose and strict construction. Jefferson, at that point, argued for strict construction, and at this point, argues for loose construction. And the people that argued for loose construction for the National Bank on the other side of the political spectrum now argue for strict construction. So, oh no, you can't do that. That's not allowable. They take complete opposite positions. Sometimes we look at current politicians and say, oh, they're especially evil and wicked. And really the answer is no, they're politicians. They're creatures of opportunity. I'm not trying to put Jefferson in the same boat as Obama, please. It was a very, very different thing. But it is interesting, the twist that takes place there, them arguing literally opposite sides of the argument here because they're on opposite sides, I think. So the sale goes through in 1803. We buy this entire hunk of land. Let me mention one other thing, or two other things that go with this. We really didn't know what we purchased. This was just, kind of this, you have this land west of the Mississippi, over there. We didn't know what was there. They didn't know what was there. So Jefferson does send out some people to explore it. Anybody know the people that explore it? Lewis and Clark is the most famous. They go in 1804. If you want to read an interesting book, there's lots of them, but there's one written about their trip. I remember I think it's a Becca history book that I had in high school. Showed a little cartoon character sitting in a canoe with a top hat, holding a paddle, kind of like this. Anybody seen that picture? Man. These guys were animals. I mean, this wasn't a Boy Scout trip. I mean, they were traveling across wilderness. They had no idea what was there. All right, anyway, not a light thing. At one point, they were eating 8 pounds of meat per person per day. Can you imagine that? A 16-ounce steak for breakfast, 2 or 3 for lunch, and 4 for dinner. Anyway, and they were consuming that much energy. Was the point? They were going upstream, with boats and things. They were exerting a massive amount of energy. Anyway, they make it across all the way to the Pacific Ocean and back. Become heroes for a time. Jefferson has some bear cubs at the White House, and so that was one. That goes in 1804. The other trip goes in 1805, or that one leaves in 1804. It's about a 2-year ordeal. The other one is in 1805, Zebulon Pike. Can anybody guess what mountain peak is named after him? Zebulon Heights? Oh, that doesn't sound familiar. Pike's Peak is named after him. So, P-I-K-E? Zebulon, Z-E-B-U-L-O-N. Lewis and Clark go this way. I mean, one of them breaks their leg, and they got all kinds of exciting things happen to them, and they come back. Zebulon is this guy, this dotted line here, Pikes Peak, and you can see it kind of disappears into Mexico. He ends up getting arrested by the authorities in Mexico. He's released in time, but he does wander outside of the Louisiana Territory and gets arrested. So, all right, so Zebulon Pike. So we really had no idea what was there, so he sends out these guys to get some idea of what is there. I think it was these guys, or it might have been a little bit later expedition that described this entire region as basically a giant desert, completely useless for agriculture. Which is kind of funny if you think about it. It is a massive piece of real estate, very good for agriculture. So. All right, so Louisiana Purchase, a massive hunk of land there. If you just look at the map there, it basically doubles the size of the territory that we have. So. All right. That is the last of the things I have listed under France. Those just deal with us and France. The next section is England and France. There's some things that come out of their war and us trying to deal with that deal with both countries. And then we'll get to the War of 1812, which is kind of the culmination of all of that struggle and strife. All right, England and France. I have beside that in parentheses Napoleonic Wars. England and France England and other countries are at war with France, with Napoleon. And Napoleon is conquering all of mainland Europe. And then England and others are trying to get onto the mainland of Europe and conquer. So there's war ravaging all across that. And we're kind of in the middle of that, trying to stay neutral. So, all right, a couple things happen here. The first one is that both England and France, both sides in this thing, wanted to prevent neutral trade from getting to the other. Right? England wanted to stop merchants from anywhere bringing any type of goods to Napoleon, and Napoleon wanted to do the same thing with England. So both sides are trying to do this. England just was a whole lot better at it. Here in this initial time frame of the war, England captures about 500 of our ships. France captures about 200 of our ships. So this is, when we're talking, it's not just one or two ships. There's hundreds of ships here that one side or the other is capturing as they are trying to take goods in there. Okay, we have layered on top of that, England continuing to impress American sailors into their navy. Who remembers that term? Jasmine?
They were captured and claimed that they were part of England.
Yeah. They would, stop a merchant vessel on the sea and bring over some British sailors, and they would look at some poor American sailor and say, "Oh yeah, that's him. We recognize him. He escaped off of their boat," and they would drag you back on the British warship, and if you tried to escape, they shot you for mutiny. You were forced into it. Or another way that they would get a bunch of guys drunk in a bar and drag them off to the boat and be out at sea before they came to themselves, and they were now part of the British Navy. They did that to their own people, and they were doing it to our people, to American citizens. We saw that already with the Jay Treaty. It continues, and now with the war with France, there's an even greater need for it. Lots of times it was just the individual ship captain who was desperate for people to operate a ship, and he was getting sailors any way he could. So it wasn't that the king said, go to that ship and take it. It was the ship captain would come by, and he needed 4 or 5 sailors, and it was a general, usual practice. So, all right, that was going on. But one thing particular here happens with this impressment that's especially aggravating, and I think justifiably so. It's called the Chesapeake Affair. The Chesapeake was an American warship. And a British warship stopped it and demanded, the excuse was to search for deserters. That was they would just claim that you were a deserter and drag you off. So a British warship stopped them, demanded to search the American warship, looking for deserters from the British Navy so they could force them back in. The Chesapeake refused. No, you're not searching our boat. So the British warship fired on it. Right? This was not something the Chesapeake was expecting. If you're familiar with if you're not familiar, I'll tell you. It took a little bit of effort to get those sailing ships ready to fight. All right, have you ever heard the term "clear the decks"? They had to get all the junk out of the way so the cannons could operate freely. There's a whole lot of work to do to get it ready to fight. So the British warship had already done all that work and was firing, and the American warship wasn't ready. They were in a very, very bad spot here. They weren't expecting this. So the American warship ends up surrendering, and the British board the ship, search it, and take 4 American sailors off, and then sail off. They don't sink the ship, they don't capture it, they just take the 4 sailors and sail off. But that's bad enough what they did. So we here have a British warship firing on an American warship and then taking American sailors off. Right? That right there was enough for lots of Americans to say it's time for war. Right? And I can understand the sentiment. Imagine if, if an Iranian warship stopped an American warship, fired on it, and took some guys captive, claiming that they're really Iranians that escaped. That wouldn't settle very well. Right? All right, so you can see this did not settle very well with lots of Americans, and justifiably so. Okay, Jefferson is the president. He's the president here, and he's not. We're really not in a position yet to go to war, partly because of Jefferson. He scaled back everything as much as he could. He wanted to have a very small military, very small navy. Tried to scale all that stuff back. So we're not in a position really to fight a war. So he and Congress tried something that didn't go so well. It's the Embargo Act of 1807. What this thing did was cut off all American exports. Right? It was American ships traveling over, across the ocean trying to trade that was at the heart of the problem. So he said, well, let's just cut it all off. His hope was that being cut off enough would put pressure on England and France. They did want American ships to come to them. They just didn't want them to go to the other side. So they wanted the cargo. They wanted the stuff. He was hoping that this would put pressure on them for them to back off and somehow negotiate this thing. It was a complete failure. It was described as curing corns by cutting off the toes. And it was just an interesting, it does take care of the corn. If you've got a corn on your toe and you completely cut the toe off, it takes care of the corn. But the remedy is a little more painful than the condition. So really a complete failure doesn't bring England or France to the point of negotiating. It ends up getting repealed as Jefferson is leaving office and Madison is coming in. So but a complete failure. Embargo Act of 1807. Okay, that is England or France and England. That issue there. The next main point, and this is several pages that we'll condense, is the War of 1812. It really continues that same line of thought. We have France and England at war. We have this ongoing dispute over their trading ships and England impressing our sailors into their navy, etc. And that issue had not been settled yet. Yeah.
What year was the Embargo Act?
1807. Gets repealed in 1808. All right, War of 1812. This is war between us and England. And let me give you the first point here. I have just labeled prelude to war. Some of the things going on before. Really, we've been talking about the prelude to war with the Embargo Act and this ongoing struggle. But here, a couple of things that happened in the time frame right beforehand. The first one is 1810. There's a new group of men that are elected to Congress who are very aggressive. They're called the War Hawks. Imagine if Iran did do that to our American ship and Congress did nothing about it, essentially, and you're mad about it, and you get elected to Congress. There's a group of men that were elected to Congress called the War Hawks who were extremely angry at England, and they were ready to do something. There's some names you might recognize, the first two probably, Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. They eventually are involved in the arguments and dispute before the Civil War. But there's a wave of these men elected to Congress who are eager for that war. They think it's justified and want to have it. Enough that they're called the War Hawks. So, all right, next thing here with the prelude. We have the new group of people coming in. Second thing is we have Madison revising the trade laws, the trade policies. We saw the Embargo Act under Jefferson cut off all trade. That didn't work. Madison revises these. He becomes the president next. And he ends up with something called the Macon Bill in 1810. Excuse me, there's some intermediary things between 1808 and 1810, but 1810 is the one that becomes significant. This thing had two main parts to it. The first part was it opened up trade with everybody. That already had been done, essentially. Opened up trade. We'd seen the Embargo Act cut it all off. So we have trade opened back up. And then the second thing it did was it said that if either England or France would stop attacking our ships, we would cut off trade with the other one. So if France would quit attacking all of our ships, we would cut off trade with England and only trade with France, and vice versa. So it's, again, trying to use that trade to put pressure on them to stop attacking our shipping. All right, so that was the second stipulation. France here under Napoleon and takes advantage of this, and he really does take advantage of it. He never intends to comply with what he claims he's going to do, but he takes advantage of it. France under Napoleon claims they're going to stop attacking any American shipping. We'll leave them alone, let them sell what they want to, trying to get us to cut off trade with England. Now, he never did, right? And by the time this comes to a head, it's obvious that he wasn't going to. But we were kind of backed into a corner by that point. So, but anyway, he says he'll cut it off. Madison then goes to England, not physically, but sends messages to England saying that they had 3 months If they would agree to stop attacking their shipping like France had agreed to, if they didn't agree to that, then they would cut off their trade. Okay? 3 months lapses by, France never really stops, but Madison is given this ultimatum, stop or else. And England didn't stop. So it was March of 1811 that we cut off trade with England. So you could argue back and forth about whether or not, Madison should have backed down or something and just say, oh, we're sorry France lied to us. He really, he felt a need, and I can't argue with it completely or too much, for America to stand. We're a new country just coming on the scene, and for us to start making demands and just, oh, I'm sorry, and back off. He didn't want to have that weak face. So anyway, he stood his ground even though France hadn't completely complied with what they claimed. So that was March of 1811 that we have trade cut off. And it was the following year, June the 18th of 1812, that we have the official declaration of war. Let me here quickly at this point give you the official reasons for the war. These are the ones that are in the, Congress declares war, and they listed reasons for it. Let me give you the 4 reasons that were given. One was impressment of American sailors. The next 2 kind of intertwine. Violation of neutral trading rights on the seas, and then just violation of neutral trade rights in general. So 2 and 3 had to do with the trading issue. And then 4 was stirring up the frontier Indians. We saw that already. They were continuing to do that. There was a very famous example of a man named Tecumseh. Right? That whole story culminates with a battle in 1811, about an hour away from here. So the British were that was an ongoing thing. They were paying the Indians, paying for scalps, and all kinds of nice things. So stirring up the frontier Indians, that was the reasons. So we have those 4 reasons listed as to why we should go to war. Okay, now let's very quickly summarize the fighting of the battles that take place. And there's as anywhere, there's lots of details, but we're going to try to just encapsulate it so you get the main gist of what happened. So there's 3 kind of sections as I have it split up as far as the way the fighting works out. The first section is war in the Northwest Territory. War in the Northwest Territory. And I have this in two lines with some details. Right. The first one is in 1812. We lost basically the entire Northwest Territory. This entire region around the Great Lakes where we live today, that entire area, the British take it all. Some with their Indian allies, some with them. There are some of the forts in the frontier areas that were taken before they knew war had been declared. They take the whole area. So, and then the second point is we regained it all. Right? I'll give you a couple details about that. But we regained it all. Two particular things to mention here. The first is a battle on Lake Erie on September the 10th of 1813. A man named Oliver Hazard Perry defeats the British on Lake Erie. That was September the 10th. And then just following that, we have a land battle, the Battle of the Thames, Thames, on October the 5th. William Henry Harrison was the commander of that battle. If you follow Tecumseh and his brother, the prophet, Tecumseh gets killed in this battle. He's the military leader for the Indians. So, the naval victory and the land victory there, those two remove the British from the area. It falls back into American control after those two victories. September the 10th, October the 5th of 1813. Okay, so that's the Northwest Territory. England takes it all, and then we take it back. Those are the two major ones. Harrison's report, he's the commander. Oliver Hazard, said that wrong. Oliver Hazard Superior was the commander on Lake Erie. He reports back to his commander, Harrison, his superior, with this phrase you might have heard: "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." That was his summary of the battle there. Okay, so we have that going on in the Northwest Territory. By the end of 1813, it's back in our hands. The next area to talk about is naval battles. And it's in two pieces as well. Early in the war, we do fairly well. See significant successes on the seas. But also early in the war, England was still at war with Napoleon. So we were literally a sideshow. They were grappling with Napoleon, trying to conquer him in Europe. So it did give our ships some operation room. So we do fairly well. The second point is, by the end of the war, all of our ships are either captured or stuck in port. They can't get out. We see the situation completely flip-flop. As England has done with Napoleon, they're able to throw their full weight at us. Okay, so naval battles. There's some famous men in there, but that's the gist of the naval battles. All right, the last thing is we have the Northwest Territory, then we have the naval battles. The last thing is England is defeated in 3 separate attacks, 3 different land invasions of North America. This is after the war with France ended, so England is able to turn their full weight at us. And 3 different attacks are defeated. So, all right, let me just give you the 3 attacks very quickly. There's one attack that came south out of Canada. It was defeated in New York State. The second attack was launched on Washington and Baltimore. They actually take Washington and burn the White House. Traitor. But it ends at another fort. What fort does it end at? The British aren't able to take it. The flag flies still by dawn's early light. Come on. Fort McHenry, all right, they take Washington, move up the channels and rivers up to Fort McHenry, and they attempt to take it, and they are stopped there. And that is where the Star Spangled Banner is written, a captive on the British ships, wondering if you can still see the flag by the glow of the bombs and that type of thing. So. All right, so that one fails, defeated at Fort McHenry. And then the last attack was on New Orleans, down there in the bottom. Remember, we bought all that from France, an attack up the bottom. Here, Andrew Jackson defeats the British on January the 8th, 1815. If you get a chance to time travel, this is one of the battles to join. The British had over 2,000 casualties, 2,036. We had 21. 8 killed, 13 wounded. So you have much better odds in this one than some other battles. So, all right, attack on New Orleans also stopped. All right, so we have those 3 attacks where they are stopped. Those are significant to me. We win, but also that's England was unencumbered by Napoleon. I mean, Napoleon is done for the time, and they're able to throw their full weight at us. And we at least hold our own. I mean, it's not like we went and conquered England, but we also kept them from invading America. So we at least hold our own there, which is if you think of a new country coming on the scene, that does give them some prestige to hold their own with the major world power at the time. So, all right, last thing, the treaty that ends the war. I have the treaty and some results of this thing that come out of it. First of all, the Treaty of Ghent, G-H-E-N-T, signed December the 24th, 1814. If you look back up to the date of the battle at New Orleans, you might see something interesting. takes place after the treaty. But again, the internet was down, so they weren't able to tell each other. So, treaty was signed December the 24th, 1814, and it really was just a ceasefire. It was, if you think of all the causes of the war, it stemmed out of England and France being at war, and that war was over. France had been defeated for the time. All right, so all of a sudden, all those things melted away and were non-issues. So it really was just a ceasefire. They agreed to quit fighting. It wasn't, nobody gave up territory. John Quincy Adams described it as, "We have obtained nothing but peace." The war is over. So the causes of the war had been settled. So not inappropriate. Now I have to ask Caleb. I've had other Canadian students who claim this is a British victory. They won the War of 1812. I don't know. Canadian victory. So, all right. I don't know, it's kind of a draw. No, we didn't fight it to the end. So, feel like stopping at who won the game last night? Oh, okay. Did I not? Fairhaven won. Which Fairhaven? The old Fairhaven one, I take it? Oh, well, obviously I didn't come down and watch it. So, but like stopping the game in the middle of the third quarter and saying, all right, now who won? He said, well, no, we didn't finish. So this one didn't. If it allowed to go to the end, who knows what would have happened, but that didn't happen. So, all right, so the Treaty of Ghent, that ends the war, basically just a ceasefire. The last thing with the War of 1812 is some results of the war. We have the treaty that stops the fighting, but there are some other results of this thing that come out. One I've already mentioned. The first one here is respect of foreign nations. Other nations saw us that, wow, there might be something to them. It was instant credibility. Trying to think of if you go to somebody's room in the dorm and you say, you know what, I really think you should do your laundry. It's beginning to stink. And as you're talking, Mr. Armacost walks around the corner and says, yeah, I was here to talk to you about that. Instantly, hopefully the guy in the room is going to listen a little bit better than before. Right? Gives you some instant credibility. And that's what this did. It put us on the scene there. We weren't just a country that lots of people were expecting to crumble and fall away to nothing. We held our own in this war. So not that we were out of the woods completely, but it put us in that direction. So respect of foreign nations. The second one is the spirit of nationalism. It brought our country together into national pride. And then the last one is westward expansion. And then I got to mention the pseudo result that is always listed as a result of war, the stimulation of American industry. Right. Can anybody think how that? What they do is they look at American factories that say, yeah, man, they were working 24 hours a day, and the employees got overtime, and the owners got lots of money, and we had this economic boom. No pun intended with the boom. Can anybody poke some holes in that and say, well, maybe it's not quite what it seems? It's a little bit of a hollow claim. Well, every war supposedly stimulates the industry of the winning country. Can anybody poke some holes in that? What was it?
They were producing things for the war.
Yeah, they're producing things for war. They literally blew them up. Right? If this works, we should have Ford Motor Company have a conveyor belt out to Lake Erie and just, drop all the cars off as they make them. We're stimulating industry because, look, the employees get to work full time around the clock. All right? The war does produce this kind of this hollow look of prosperity, but everything they're making is getting blown up and destroyed. All right? So it's not, it doesn't. And all the things that they're making, the government takes money from the citizens, makes the stuff that goes and gets blown up. Right? And in the end, the citizens just don't have the money. Now, the war needed to be fought. I'm not trying to argue that, but economically, it's a shell game to claim it stimulates American industry. So it'd be much like you getting a credit card with a $10,000 limit, and for a couple months in the dorm, you could be everybody's best friend, buying pizza, buying gifts for people. But once they hit the credit limit, all of a sudden it doesn't look so prosperous. So anyway, it's always listed, and it's always a fallacy. All right, so that's the War of 1812. Questions there? We can't stop. Sorry. We have one more thing to mention here in this establishment of the general government here in foreign affairs, and that's the Monroe Doctrine. This comes along in 1823. So we have the war ends in 1814. 9 years later, the Monroe Doctrine. You may guess the president? Yeah, very good. All right, very good. All right, let me give you what this doctrine said. He issued it in a speech, about other things, and kind of threw it in on the side. This is what we think. But it said basically two things. It said that America would stay out of European affairs. If France and Germany want to go to war, have at it, have fun. We're going to stay out of it. And then the second thing was that Europeans should stay out of the affairs in the Americas. And here they were extending it to North and South America, the whole continents of North and South America. So you guys stay over there, we'll stay over here. Right. That was his doctrine, his statement of American foreign policy, really. We're not going to meddle with your affairs, and we don't want you over here meddling with ours. So that was not just given in a vacuum. He didn't just get up one day and say, let's see what we can do to irritate the Europeans and issue some rash statement. There was some things happening. Does anybody know the background here of what's going on in the world? Okay. Does anybody know anything? 2 plus 2. I did hear something very interesting. How many for the golden ratio? Oh well, it's a ratio between the length of a side and a leg of a picture or something. It's supposedly the one that's most aesthetically pleasing. It's also the only number that when you square it and when you add 1 to it, you get the same answer. Oh, see that? Not too excited? That's what you get when you have a math major as your history teacher. All right, the background. What's going on here with this thing? It comes out of the Napoleonic era. Napoleon is defeated. Then we win the War of 1812 against England. Then Napoleon comes back. We have another round of fighting. Ends at Waterloo and the final defeat of Napoleon. And then all of the European leaders get together to decide what they're going to do with Europe. I mean, Napoleon had just kind of leveled countries and, intertwined borders, and, it was all a big mess. So they get together trying to figure out how they're going to carve all this thing up and kind of reestablish some sort of normalcy. That same meeting said, well, what about all those colonies over in America? During that, while everybody's fighting, they'd started to flex their muscles and become independent and break away from European control. So at the same meeting, they started making plans to come to America and reconquer these colonies in Central and South America. And that's when Monroe said, I'm not too excited about that. You guys just stay over there. All right, so that was the international situation going on that brought him about to bring this thing up. So, all right, establishing the general government. Questions on that? We have 5 minutes. I can't. If you guys hadn't been so slow and lethargic listening all the way along, I would, but it's your fault. Kidding. It's probably my fault. Too many stories about the golden ratio. All right. What I want to start in next is a section that will be quick. It won't quite be 5 minutes, but I at least want to try to get a little bit of it done. I want to talk about the early presidents. We've already talked about them, mentioned their roles in these different events. But look at their administrations, and there's some things that come up in some of them that didn't fit in the other pieces, and so we'll talk about them here very, very briefly. So the first one I want to talk about is Washington. And I just want to mention two things about him. First, when he gives a farewell address at the end of his presidency, and gives lots of very good advice that we've ignored. Right? He warns against the spirit of party, which I've always thought sounds like what happens in the guy's dorm or something. Party. Talking about political parties. Talking about the devices of political parties. Warned about entangling alliances with foreign countries. And that's something for a long time with the Monroe Doctrine, we tried to hold the line. But by the time you get over into into World War I and that era, we're so entangled with countries around the world, and even to this day, we're entangled with them. So anyway, he gives lots of very, very good advice in that farewell address that he gives as he leaves office. And then the second thing, and maybe more importantly for him, is he sets a precedent for just peacefully walking away from the presidency. He serves 2 terms and leaves. There was nothing in the Constitution that held him to 2 terms. Right? There is now, but there wasn't at that point. He could have followed and served another time, but he just peacefully walks away. And if you think of other times through history when there's a change of the head of the government, the head before either died or was killed. Right? You know, it's not normal for the one to just walk away peacefully and the other guy to step in and take over, and there not to be major problems. Washington does this, right? And we've gotten used to it. President comes in, a new one leaves. But through history, especially at that point, it wasn't the norm.
Don't the ones that are alive now, even today, they like try to pack everything and get a big push against what the new guy's going to do?
As they're leaving office, you're saying, or? Oh, I mean, there's still the spirit of party lives on. I mean, but I mean, George W. Bush, he's left office, and he really, and intentionally on his part, he has not said, or he's been very, very non-involved, because he's not the president. The new president takes over. So anyway, that spirit runs all the way back to Washington. So, all right. So a peaceful transition of power, that was not the norm. I think we well could at that point. So tomorrow, bring your fast pens, please.